The phrase molasses flood sounds like a quirky bit of local folklore, the kind of story told with a wink. On January 15, 1919, that image was shattered when a massive wave of dark syrup tore through Boston's North End, flattening buildings and burying a busy neighborhood under tons of wreckage. It left 21 people dead and 150 injured, many of whom were trapped as the liquid cooled and hardened around them. This wasn't a freak act of nature. It was a disaster fueled by corporate neglect, and the fallout from this event would eventually reach into the very foundation of how we build our cities today. To understand how this happened, we have to look at 1915. World War I had created a massive demand for industrial alcohol, which was distilled from fermented molasses and used to manufacture munitions. The United States Industrial Alcohol Company, or USIA, rushed to meet that demand by building a storage tank on Commercial Street. It stood 50 feet tall and was designed to hold over 2 million gallons of molasses. In this era, there were no building permits required for such a structure. The company used steel that was significantly thinner than the weight required, and they skipped the basic safety tests that would have revealed structural flaws. Residents soon began to hear the tank groan and shudder. It leaked so much that neighborhood children would gather the drippings in cups from the sidewalk. USIA's response to the leaks was purely cosmetic. Instead of reinforcing the steel or emptying the tank, they painted the entire exterior brown to hide the seeping molasses from public view. They had constructed a massive, pressurized container in a crowded neighborhood with virtually no regard for the physics of the fluid inside. On January 15th, temperatures in Boston climbed rapidly, rising from freezing to over 40 degrees Fahrenheit in a single day. Heat combined with warm molasses to accelerate fermentation, releasing carbon dioxide gas that exerted tremendous pressure against the compromised steel walls. At 12:30 p.m., the tank failed. Rivets shot out, and the walls tore apart, releasing 2 million gallons in an instant. Normally, molasses is incredibly viscous, but it is a non-Newtonian fluid. It possesses a property called shear thinning. Under the immense explosive pressure of the tank's collapse, the syrup shear thinned, temporarily behaving more like water than syrup, flowing with terrifying speed. The resulting wave was 15 to 25 feet high and moving at 35 miles per hour. It possessed enough kinetic energy to snap the steel girders of the elevated railway and sweep houses off their foundations. For those first 30 seconds, the molasses behaved like a high-speed tsunami, leaving no time for those in its path to escape. But as the wave lost momentum and spread across the neighborhood, it hit the freezing winter air. The physics reversed. As the syrup cooled, its viscosity increased by as much as 100 times. The fast-moving wave transformed into a thick, gelatinous quicksand. People who had been knocked down were now pinned beneath the heavy, cooling muck. Sailors and firefighters arrived quickly, but they found themselves wading through knee-deep sludge. The cooling molasses became so difficult to move that victims continued to suffocate hours after the initial wave had passed. The very stickiness that defines molasses turned the disaster site into a suffocating, inescapable trap. The cleanup took weeks. Fireboats had to pump thousands of gallons of salt water to flush the streets, and for decades afterward, residents claimed the neighborhood still smelled of molasses on hot days. USIA immediately tried to avoid liability, claiming that Italian anarchists had planted a bomb on the tank. Instead of individual settlements, 119 claims were consolidated into a single massive lawsuit, Dorr versus United States Industrial Alcohol Company. By combining their resources, the victims created an early, successful model for the class action lawsuit, shifting the focus from corporate excuses to forensic engineering. The trial became a years-long battle of mathematics and physics, as investigators worked to prove the tank was fundamentally unsound from the day it was built. After 5 years of testimony, engineers mathematically demonstrated that the tank's thin steel was incapable of holding its contents. There was no bomb. It was structural failure. The court found USA entirely at fault, forcing them to pay over $600,000 in damages, the equivalent of roughly $8 million today. This verdict fundamentally changed how industrial projects were regulated. In the wake of the trial, Massachusetts passed laws requiring building plans to be certified by professional engineers and approved by public officials before construction could even begin. The engineering certifications, zoning laws, and building codes that protect our cities today weren't just common sense, they were written in the wreckage of the Great Molasses Flood.